Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honorable members, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support and to completely associate myself with the budget address in Honorable Prime Minister on January 28th, 2015 in this Honorable House. But Mr. Speaker, before I go into my address, I would like to take a brief moment to bring my sincerest condolences and sympathies to the families of the bereaved in Fancy, the villagers of Fancy. A very sad moment in our history, and one that we will always remember. Mr. Speaker, on that morning, I journeyed out to the site at Fancy. And I must say that there was great evidence that as a people, whilst there are many things which divide us from time to time, that in a time of a crisis, we know how to work together, to cooperate, and to build for the betterment of any situation. Mr. Speaker, yesterday evening, I received a poem from a past student of the North Union Secondary School. And please permit me, Mr. Speaker, to share. Softly the leaves of memory fall. Gently we gather and treasure them. Though now unheard, you are always near. So missed, so loved, so very dear. Mr. Speaker, because of the passing of a relative of mine, Sarah Peters, who was buried on the same Sunday of the funeral in Fancy, I wasn't able to attend the entire funeral service. But Mr. Speaker, in solidarity, I overnighted in Fancy the Saturday night, and I am going to ensure that I spend as much time as possible with the people of Fancy in their period of mourning. The North Union Secondary School, the sole secondary school in my constituency, Mr. Speaker, there were 14 young persons on that bus that morning going to the North Union Secondary School. And this Friday, a memorial service is going to be held in the constituency at a church, and we are going to march back to the secondary school where we are going to have moments of reflections. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday I attended the funeral service of His Excellency Conrad Sutherland, the patriarch of the Spiritual Baptist Church, a church that I am very close to. And we have lost in Conrad Sutherland a freedom fighter, a man who fought for the freedom of worship of the Spiritual Baptist Church. Very quiet man from Hadley's village. A lot of persons in the constituency of South Central Windward and in the country may never hear about him, never met him, but he did great work for the Spiritual Baptist people. Mr. Speaker, my constituency is also mourning the passing of Otis Jack, a young man, very high-spirited, I have never seen him sad or sick. But Mr. Speaker, all these events are showing us that one of these days, we too will have to go that fateful way. And Mr. Speaker, by means of congratulating, it will be remiss of me if I do not mention my very close friend and comrade, Kenville Horn, who recently received acknowledgement from Her Majesty. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to highly commend the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance and all the ministries for their hard work and input in crafting the final product that we are here to debate. And Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by saying clearly, this budget is a people-centered budget. When we think about the Lives to Live program, I remember, and I know that every single representative on either side of the House, and every member of Parliament, that you will know someone who will be touched by this program. Mr. Speaker, the home care for the elderly is continuing. Again, touching the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So when I sit, Mr. Speaker, and I hear persons saying that this budget is not about the people, that is the furthest thing from the truth. Mr. Speaker, it is definitely an appropriate budget for our times. A marriage of an exercise in fiscal discipline and prudence, taking into consideration the need for economic growth. Mr. Speaker, I am delighted to participate in this budget because there is a certain excitement when you are seeking to find solutions in challenging times. And Mr. Speaker, this government, we are not afraid of challenges. Challenges must come, and it is our job to find the solutions. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the agricultural sector. And there is 100% consensus that the agricultural sector is critical for the development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are not divided on that. Mr. Speaker, today, there are farmers who are listening in my presentation and who are listening in Parliament. Farmers in South Rivers, in Diamonds, in Park Hill, in Chapmans, on the leeward side of this country. Farmers are following because they know that this budget is going to touch and concern their livelihood. The fishers are also paying close attention. Persons in the private sector, community-based organizations, CBOs. Mr. Speaker, during my debate on the estimates, I would have settled half of the score on the issue of bananas. Mr. Speaker, today I want to settle the entire score. And I'm going to take my time. I'm going to go through it because when the talk show host is having his time and is speaking sometimes things that are not factual about the banana industry, I may be busy in my ministry or in my constituency doing something else. So I have to take the time in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, so that the farmers who are listening and the general public could get a holistic understanding and appreciation of the banana story in this country and in the windwards. Mr. Speaker, I turn to an autobiography by former Prime Minister Sir James Mitchell, Beyond the Islands, page 421. And this is what he had to say on the issue of bananas. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say, I am not pointing fingers at Sir James, because I agree with him on this point, that he was speaking about the reality at the time. But sometimes when we come in this honorable house and we listen to the opposition on the other side, the honorable members on the other side, they give the impression that there has been a decline in the banana industry only since the Unity Labour Party came to office. But Mr. Speaker, that is the furthest thing from the truth. And I'm going to take my time and I'm going to go through the figures with you. Mr. Speaker, on page 421, this is what the Honorable Prime Minister had to say. Last election on fourth term, concluding the agenda, he noted, with the demise of the banana industry in sight. That is what Sir James said. With the demise of the banana industry in sight. And what he was saying that in reference to was he was making a comparison between where the industry was in 1992, understanding and appreciating that with the removal and the erosion of trade preferences, that we were moving away from the period when we were producing so much bananas and making so much income from it. That is, I'm putting it simply. But Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the statistics. And let us analyze the last 8 years of the NDP administration. Let us roll back the curtains, Mr. Speaker, of memories now and then. The last 8 years of the NDP administration, 1992 to 2000, as it relates to the number of active farmers, active banana farmers. Mr. Speaker, in 1992, there were 7,855 active banana farmers. In 1992. 7,855. By 1993, 1 year later, 312 farmers left the industry, down to 7,543. 1994, 2 years after 1992, when the industry brought $112 million into this country, under the NDP administration, 2 years after 1992, in 1994, 1,404 banana farmers left the industry. Mr. Speaker, I know in this honorable house and during these debates, persons usually ask to see the figures. And if at any point anyone on the other side would want to see the figures, they are here. Mr. Speaker, by the year 2000, and those of us, I know the students are among us, they will take their time and do the calculations. In 1994, there were 6,139 banana farmers. Another big year, between 1996, Mr. Speaker, and 1997, 995 banana farmers left the industry. And in total, in the last 8 years of the New Democratic Party's administration, 4,232 farmers left the industry. Mr. Speaker, let me say this, and I say this with all honesty. My heart is pure. I am not pointing fingers at the NDP and the New Democratic Party administration at the time for persons leaving the industry. I am not raising these figures for that. Because, Mr. Speaker, I am above that. And I know that there were significant externalities which exist today still. And worse, because we have the vagaries of climate change, but the New Democratic Party will not get up and read these figures to you. They will not publish these in the newspapers. What they would want to do is to give the impression that all fell down since 2001. Mr. Speaker, the truth be told, 53% of the farmers left the industry between 1992 and 2000. And one of these days, some young scholar will explore thesis as to what was the impact of all the factors. Mr. Speaker, I said that in the estimates I would have settled half of the score, but I want to settle the entire score now. In 1992, Mr. Speaker, the industry exported bananas valued at $112 million in 1992. By 1993, you would expect that after such a big year in 1992, with 112 million, that the next year was going to be 100 million. It went down from 112 million to 69 million. And in 94, from 69 million to 45 million. Eventually, when the New Democratic Party left office, it was down to $36 million. Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking in complete silence. Mr. Speaker, I am associated to the research officer for the New Democratic Party, and I will make these documents available to him. Because sometimes when I hear him speak, he's speaking on bananas without the information. The research officer. That's the man who lost in South Central by 560 votes the last time and is going to lose by over 1,000 votes the next time. But Mr. Speaker, let us not be sidetracked. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition made a comparison. He was saying in his address what is happening in Dominica, what is happening in St. Lucia. I didn't hear about Grenada because Grenada stopped shipping a long time ago, since 2004. And Dominica has recently been suspended. And Mr. Speaker, I'm not saying this with any glee that somebody is suspended. I'm just speaking the truth. Because the industry is being attacked by Black Sigatoka and Moko, and it is going to have significant negative impacts on the quality. But Mr. Speaker, for those persons who are interested in doing the comparisons, in the year 1992, 250,000 tons of bananas were exported from 4 islands in the Windwards. By 2001, it was down to 80,000 tons. From 250 to 80,000 tons. And for those who are listening, the reason why I'm using 1992 to 2001, it was the last days of the New Democratic Party, the administration in St. Vincent. And I have the graph here. I didn't draw the graph. It is from Windfresh, the source tabulating the information. But Mr. Speaker, as I said again, whilst I love history, and history is a very romantic subject, it is our duty and our obligation as a government to state the roadmap and the way forward for the industry. And Mr. Speaker, I want to say this now. It is the intention of this government to have 3,000 acres of bananas cultivated in this country and to continue to build it in a viable and a sustainable manner. Mr. Speaker, sometimes when we analyze, we do it in a very superficial manner and we do not dig deep enough in our analyses. Hurricane Thomas destroyed 98% of the banana plants in this country. But the more important question, Mr. Speaker, what was the impact of Hurricane Thomas on the banana industry? Mr. Speaker, I listened to the member for North Leeward last evening, and he spoke about bananas. I also followed the presentation of the leader of the opposition. He spoke about bananas as well. But there is a fundamental difference between a banana field and the banana industry. And it takes careful thinking if you are outside of the situation to understand it. Mr. Speaker, there are many ancillary services and organizations working to keep the industry together. And what happened in 2010, October the 30th, when we lost 98% of the banana plants, we had a toppling of many of the ancillary organizations and bodies which comprise the industry. NFTO, the National Fair Trade Organization, if 98% of the bananas are down, you would only expect that the morale in the organization would suffer a significant blow and that meetings will not be as regular as they used to be. And what this will lead to? Since there is no room for conventional bananas in the UK, you had a crumbling in the NFTO setup. WINFA, with persons being quiet on the issue of banana production in the aftermath of such a great storm, the mobilizing ability of WINFA also suffered. Also the ability of the NFTO and WINFA to earn. Mr. Speaker, the Banana Services Unit, another very important entity in the whole enterprise, addresses the issue of aerial spraying, ground spraying, and extension services. And Mr. Van Loo is doing excellent work with his team, and we have to incentivize the team because we want the team to work even harder. Mr. Speaker, there will be 6 aerial cycles during the course of 2015, And an additional vehicle has been assigned to the ground crew that is going to continue the spraying. Also, the BSU would have purchased mist blowers to ensure that we have a more efficient application of the fungicides in 2015. The agricultural input warehouse. Mr. Speaker, sometimes when I listen to discussion on the price for sack of fertilizer, there are many farmers in this country and many persons, probably even in this honorable house, who are not aware that every sack of fertilizer sold is being subsidized by $20. A sack of fertilizer to be sold at $120 is sold by the input warehouse at $100. And now, because of the fall in oil prices, we are now reducing the price, and the price is now reduced to $80 per sack. And the farmers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Speaker, can rest assured that I am going to have a meeting with the permanent secretary in the ministry and with the manager of the input warehouse, because we have to ensure that we go about and negotiate with those companies selling us fertilizer and other products. Now that there's a fall in the price for petroleum on the world market, we want to ensure that you do not continue to choke us, but that we too, the farmers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, can cash in on that fall in prices. I didn't hear that coming from the opposition at all, because the opposition in their presentation, from my understanding, did not have a holistic appreciation of the industry. And they were only speaking about the control of black sigatoka, as important as it may be, and the replanting process. But the banana field is one thing. The banana industry is a whole different thing. Mr. Speaker, the tissue culture lab, built during the period of this administration. Some 60 workers are working in the tissue culture lab presently. And I have spoken to the permanent secretary, and I have advised him that as a matter of policy, during the period 2015, we are going to ensure that we maximize the production of banana plantlets in the tissue culture lab. And I am expecting from him a quotation as to how much it is going to cost, because we expect to produce, and I want the farmers to listen to this, because there are many persons who have applications in for banana plants. We are expecting to produce 500 acres worth of planting material in 2015. I listened quite attentively, Mr. Speaker, to the honorable member for North Leeward yesterday. And I must say this, that both the honorable member for North Leeward and the honorable leader of the opposition, in their debates on the issue of bananas, they were not as harsh as they were last year. In fact, what the honorable member for North Leeward said, he said that he sang praises for the Ministry of Agriculture, but he said that he is hopeful and he's looking out to see if the efforts that are already started as to whether or not they will be sustained. But Mr. Speaker, as long as I am the Minister of Agriculture, I would ensure that I work with the team in the Ministry of Agriculture so that we have a sustained effort throughout 2015 and beyond to ensure that we replant as many acres of bananas in this country. Because this government we know of the critical importance of the banana industry to the citizens of this country. Mr. Speaker, in the constituency of North Leeward alone, in the month of January, 15 acres were cultivated. 15 acres, 5 acres every week. So you could imagine the kind of activity taking place down there in North Leeward. Mr. Speaker, the BAM also will be assisting us in rebuilding the industry, the banana accompanying measures, the pesticide spits, addressing the issue of certification with the provision of certain things, dolomite. Wind crop also has a very important role to play, and we have to ensure that we ensure as many acres that we intend to plant. I'm not hearing these things from the opposition, the role of wind crop and all these things. But these are critical to the industry. And of course, Mr. Speaker, St. Vincent and the Grenadines Container Corporation, the producer of the boxes. Because we could only imagine, after 2010, there was a fall in the demand for boxes. And with that fall in the demand for boxes, the profitability of the company would have been reduced. Because in a conversation with the manager, they are heavily dependent on the production of banana boxes to keep their business as a going concern. So, Mr. Speaker, I know the farmers who are listening are appreciating that this government, we have a holistic appreciation of all the ancillary bodies, organizations, and entities which we must work with to ensure that we rebuild the industry. And I must note this, Mr. Speaker, this government has an approach that whenever we rebuild better.
Good policy.
Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the root crop subsector. And post the disaster of 2010 and the presence of black sigatoka in this country, many banana farmers went into root crops. In fact, they were technically advised that if you had an abandoned field and you were not sufficiently enough confident to go back into bananas, that you must diversify into root crops, and we provided the requisite support. Mr. Speaker, but what is happening now? The owners of the shipping vessel to Trinidad had to buy a new vessel with twice the capacity. But according to Senator Jomo Thomas in his presentation, that's good news. You didn't hear about that on some talk show, that we have so much root crops now to send to Trinidad that a new vessel had to be bought with twice the capacity. Mr. Speaker, sometimes I am bombarded in my office. I don't like to use the word traffickers because sometimes it comes off wrong. Traders to Trinidad will come to my secretary asking for the Minister of Agriculture to come down to the port to ensure that their load gets onto the boat. You know why they want that? Because there's so much load to go to Trinidad from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and we must commend our root crop farmers for continuing to do excellent work, and that is why we have been able to corner 98% of the root crops going into Trinidad and Tobago originate in St. Vincent. Mr. Speaker, when you go, whether you're in San Fernando, in Chaguanas Arima, in Couva, any root crop stand you go, they will tell you these are the Vincies.
That's it, man. Good story, man.
We have a place in the market in Trinidad.
Talk your talk, man.
But Mr. Speaker, there's a disadvantage to almost overproducing in root crops. My constituency, the constituency of South Central Windward, is an agricultural-based constituency. And the farmers are complaining about the low prices. But it is inevitable that if we produce so much, we would flood the market from time to time, and the prices will remain low. And Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, but just to say that we are ahead of the game, and I have spoken to the CEO of Windfresh and also the chairman of Windfresh, that during the course of this year, pursuant to a memorandum of understanding that we have with Windfresh, we are going to ease the burden of some of the quantities of the root crops that we send on the regional market. We are going to send them to the United Kingdom, and I want our farmers to look forward to that.
Yes, man. Good move, good move. Managing well, man.
Mr. Speaker, arrowroot. There is a story to be told about arrowroot in this country.
Good story too.
Over the last few years. This is amazing. Arrowroot starch from St. Vincent and the Grenadines is arguably the most expensive starch in the entire world.
Nice, man.
Fetching a retail price of $50 per pound.
Good, man. Good.
The young persons who are here, I heard mentioned yesterday about Google, but you could Google it. Frontier Cooperative, St. Vincent arrowroot starch, a little bag of it is $50 per pound.
It's a good story.
Mr. Speaker, our farmers for many years in arrowroot were rewarded but not rewarded sufficiently. But the honorable member for North Windward, also persons within the ministry, lobbied, and I must note that Mr. Colville King in the Ministry of Agriculture had a very critical role to play in the lobbying, and we were able to move the price for starch from St. Vincent from $5 per pound to $7 per pound that we receive at the association. And to increase, Mr. Speaker, from 35 cents per pound for rhizomes to now $1 per pound. Mr. Speaker, the hard work of the Ministry of Agriculture is written over many hills and valleys in this country. At one time, you had to go to North Windward to see arrowroot. Now it is in North Central Windward. It is in South Central Windward. It is planted in Maraqua. And a few cabinets ago, I saw the elated look on the face of the Honorable Senator Julian Francis when he realized that arrowroot is also being planted in North Leeward.
Now you want it in Western Georgia?
In squats. Mr. Speaker, the target is for us to have 1,000 acres of arrowroot planted in this country. The expansion has to take a longer time than we expected because we can't use all the rhizomes for replanting. We have to also produce starch so that we could hold ourselves in the marketplace. But over time, we intend to build up to 1,000 acres.
Good work.
Mr. Speaker, livestock. And I have noted this, and I continue to note it at any OECS meeting that we have on agriculture. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is the largest exporter of cattle in the OECS.
Good news, man. Good news.
And we are in the top 5 in CARICOM.
Good news, man. Good news.
Mr. Speaker, we intend in this year to continue to do the work necessary to ensure that the numbers in the national herd, that we protect it, because I know the fear by the butcher stall, by Metan in Sanssouci, is that one of these days we might not have enough for ourselves. But Mr. Speaker, we are ahead of the game. We are ahead of the game, and I want all honorable members. I received a letter from the ambassador of the Republic of Cuba to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and he said, Dear Minister, in relation with your requesting of the Cubans expert on artificial insemination, Dr. Sol, I would like to inform you that the mentioned expert is ready to travel to St. Vincent and the Grenadines on the 18th of February 2015.
Good news, man.
So, Mr. Speaker, while we're exporting, we are ensuring that we utilize the technology so that our stocks would not be significantly reduced.
Good news too.
Mr. Speaker, we continue to explore the 35 million US dollars goat and sheep market in Trinidad and Tobago, and it is the intention of the Ministry of Agriculture to begin to export to Trinidad and Tobago before the end of 2015. Mr. Speaker, what is more, seeing the need for expansion, it is a policy of the ministry to utilize $1 million of the $6 million fund in the Farmer Support Company directed to livestock. So we're exporting the cattle, we are bringing in someone to do the artificial insemination in cattle. We want to export sheep and goats to Trinidad and Tobago. We are sending our people to Taiwan for training so that when they come back, we could adjust that. And we are also providing credit to farmers who are in livestock production to invest more. Mr. Speaker, that is simply remarkable, and that is people-centered.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, the BAM, during the course of 2015, will be addressing the issue of the abattoir, and also with the abattoir, we will be able to produce more local cuts for the tourism sector here, therefore assisting us by reducing our imports in some of the special cuts in beef and mutton that we usually import currently. Mr. Speaker, Pradia Larceny. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition mentioned it. The Honorable Member for North Leeward mentioned it, and Senator Linton Lewis also mentioned it. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity, whilst working at the Attorney General's chambers, to traverse the length and breadth of this country with the Ministry of Agriculture to put the piece of legislation together, the Agricultural Produce and Livestock Prevention of Theft Act. Mr. Speaker, in a recent meeting at Cabinet, the Commissioner of Police was present, and I just want us to note, because Mr. Speaker, sometimes when you are implementing a policy and you're doing it in a very robust manner, you end up, as a policymaker, getting most of the blame. But in order for us to solve the problem of Pradia Larceny, we have to be rigid in the implementation of the legislation. I have with me, Mr. Speaker, a receipt book. And I am asking every single farmer to ensure that you get your receipt books. The Permanent Secretary is putting the requisite framework in place to ensure that we get them out, but not only to get them, but also to use them. And I do not want, and I would not wish to have a complaint from the citizenry when the stop and searches are being done, that persons are saying we are being inconvenienced, because they would have to be done. It's part and parcel of addressing the problem of Pradia Larceny. Mr. Speaker, cocoa condiments and spices. Very important, and we have assigned Mr. Hanif King to head this unit. We have a germplasm, and we have 200,000 plantlets that we are going to set out a work program. There's already a work program to plant out as many of these plants in 2015. Mr. Speaker, an MOU is to be signed with the government of Grenada to assist us in developing our nutmeg and cocoa industry. And I also received, Mr. Speaker, a document from the Minister of Food and Agriculture in Ghana pledging 100% support in us developing our cocoa, condiments, and spices sector here in this country. Mr. Speaker, I have to smile when I come to this topic. The Farmers Support Company. According to the farmers, it's the best thing since sliced bread. Yep. Mr. Speaker, according to the farmers of this country, the Farmers Support Company is the best thing since sliced bread.
Tell the story, man. Tell the story. You have a story to tell.
Mr. Speaker,
give the good news. Good story, man.
Mr. Speaker, as the Farmers Support Company approaches 1 year, it's going to be the best doing 1 year old in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And I want to commend the staff of the FSC for doing excellent work. In less than a year, and I have to say this, Mr. Speaker, there was a period of parenting when the Minister of Finance came into the Ministry of Agriculture and he asked for greater efficiency and speed. And Mr. Speaker, that was during less than the first 60 days. But in the embryonic stages, persons were getting accustomed and acclimatized. And within the first year, over 1,000 farmers in St. Vincent and the Grenadines would have received loans. $5 million in loans allocated, $750,000 in grants. But Mr. Speaker, what is more is that 1,400 farmers have been assessed. There is where the work is, to actually go out and to do the assessments. Mr. Speaker, 1,112 farmers approved, and I know this is going to bring smiles on many faces, because I remember right here during my debate on the estimates, when there was some who was saying that the farmers would not pay back. Mr. Speaker, I want all farmers to hear this, and everyone here. So far, the Farmers Support Company has recovered $482,223.10. And it speaks, Mr. Speaker, I am looking past the dollars and cents. It speaks to the honesty, the respect, the commitment, and the hard work of the farmers of this country to support a company established to support them.
Excellent job.
$5 million, you know. Yes. Yes. Mr. Speaker, and many persons thought it was going to be a one input of $6 million. In this budget, there's $6 more million from the much disputed Petro-Carib. $6 more million to go to the farmers.
Say that again.
Mr. Speaker, I now turn to fisheries. We have significant potential for growth. We have expansive seascape and a comparative advantage. Mr. Speaker, this government would have had a $6 million fleet expansion program, but a lot of fishers did not take up the challenge. We still have the challenge of the lionfish. But one of the main challenges that we have in the fisheries sector is the absence of major airlift. And we had an attempt where we exported significant quantities of fish to the US, but because of the absence of the airlift, an international airport, we were not able to hold ourselves in the marketplace because of the reduction, because of the quality of the fish when it was received. But Mr. Speaker, 11 million ISI dollars is allocated. The government of Japan, by way of a grant, is going to assist us to rebuild, refurbish, and to get our systems right. Because whilst we want to have the partnership with the private sector, we have to ensure that we have the centers at tip-top shape. Mr. Speaker, I am still very much concerned that some persons who utilize our seascape, they are not taking conservation as something that is pivotal and primary. And I would ensure that during the period of 2015 that we do the requisite policing. We are receiving assistance from the FAO to establish a land bank, and we are going to work on that in 2015. Rural transformation, Mr. Speaker, we have a well-oiled program to reduce hunger and undernourishment in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as close to zero as possible. It's well known of our achievements, recognized by the FAO and the United Nations for reducing hunger and undernourishment in this country. And I'll now turn to the BNTF. Mr. Speaker, can I get a time check, please?
You now have 23 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, in 2015, and I'm going to detail it, the BNTF will be doing the following projects. The Gurley Corner Road, Richland Park, Road and Drainage Improvement Project, $741,000. Kakata Village Footpath, Fitzhughes, Chateaubriand, $323,000. Roseau Road Upgrade in Lauders, $700,000. Linley Valley Road in Rose Hall. The Greg's Primary School, Preschool, Queens Drive Footpath, Diamond School Kitchen, George Stevens Senior Secondary School Literacy Center. Assistance also for the backyard gardening for food security and enhanced livelihoods. Rose Hall School Upgrade, Belmont School Upgrade, Belair School Upgrade, Best Practice Training for Early Childhood Education Teachers, Part 1 and Part 2, $80,000. Glenside Mespo Drainage Improvement, $250,000. And we are going to do some work in Barreley, in Bottle and Glass. Toilets, baths, washing facilities for $1 million. And these works are expected to be done in 2015. Mr. Speaker, forestry. We suffered significantly during the December disaster, Mr. Speaker, and we are working steadfastly to ensure that the forest is rehabilitated. Mr. Providence is working very well with his team. Reforestation, tending of plantations, thinning of plantations, trail maintenance, contour cleaning, public education, and watershed management. Mr. Speaker, the CED, we have to get it right in 2015 with the CED. There's a lot of work to be done. It's the Center for Enterprise Development. And I stand here and I speak honestly to the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines because they pay me to be here. Mr. Speaker, we have to do better with the resources in the CED, and we have to ensure that we are not resident in one locale, but that we stretch our roles and responsibilities throughout the entire country. Mr. Speaker, I will speak more on that at another time. I now turn, Mr. Speaker, and I will say this, I'll preface it by this. I love all constituencies, but I have a special love for the constituency and the people of South Central Windward.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, we rallied in 2014 to ensure that we draft an indigenous plan to increase production and productivity in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, during the first quarter, before the end of the first quarter in 2015, this year, we in South Central Windward, we are going to launch the South Central Windward Production and Productivity Strategic Plan, all embracing every single village. The Argyle International Airport will bring significant benefits to this country. But as a constituency, we are meeting to ensure that when the Argyle International Airport is open, that some taxi drivers are already ready from South Central Windward to move. That when tours are being sought, that you could do a tour in the constituency of South Central Windward. That when persons are looking for a place to stay, to have an authentic experience. Well, I stand by somebody. That you can come to South Central Windward and you can get that experience.
Yes.
And Mr. Speaker, I must say this. We have been going about it in a non-partisan manner. We have our town hall meetings, and we are going to continue our town hall meetings. Persons are coming out. Because the people of South Central Windward, we recognize that we have a country to build. Yes. And as the songwriter said, if we don't do it, who will? Right. So while some persons are fixated on the date of the opening of the international airport, the people of South Central Windward, and I know it's happening in other constituencies too, but talking for myself, that we are preparing so that when it is open, we won't be left with our mouths open, wondering why we did not prepare ourselves.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, there is also going to be a need for certain commodities, agricultural commodities, to be produced, because the tourism market will demand certain items more than we would generally demand.
You got that right.
And we want in South Central Windward to utilize the cooperative setup that we have, and I must commend the Minister of Cooperatives for doing excellent work.
Well done.
With the Ministry of Cooperatives to ensure that the market at North Union will play an integral role in producing the zucchinis,
Yes.
more butternut squash,
You want them all.
and other items which you would utilize in the tourism
Keep producing them, man.
sector by the hotels.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, in South Central Windward, we have some important land matters to address. The cemetery in Chapman's, I have already spoken to the owners of a particular parcel of land that we have earmarked for the cemetery. Discussions are being held for lands in Diamonds. Lands are to be distributed in Montgrenan for agriculture. Meeting where 150 persons came out in Lauders, 650 acres of land for persons in Lauders, Lowmans, Higher Lowmans, Greggs, Chapmans, and Antwine level. We want them to formalize their title. Because, Mr. Speaker, what I do not want, because there are a lot of lands in South Central Windward that are not formalized. I do not want when Lauders produces its first medical doctor and she returns to Lauders and she's just finishing up her final course. I don't want her to go and live in another constituency just because she couldn't find any more land in Lauders. So I have to make the lands available so that the young people in South Central Windward can find parcels of land to live on and remain to continue to build their constituency and their villages. Mr. Speaker,
Good vision.
when you move out of your area, you carry a lot of wealth with you.
Yes, that is true.
And this is something that we could discuss here all day. How you destroy a village by outward migration. It is a popular geographic concept.
Yes,
Mr. Speaker, sports will continue to play a very important role in the constituency of South Central Windward.
Central to development.
There are 8 hard courts and 5 playing fields. That's a lot. And I need to, Mr. Speaker, that as an old footballer,
Don't say old. Don't say
as an old footballer,
old is not a good word. Dormant.
Mr. Speaker,
Dormant.
I remember the days when we had
Use dormant.
2 or 3 football fields and we had a lot of persons practicing together, and the competition on the few fields was extremely high. A high level of competition. The same with net balls. When you had few hard courts, you had more persons coming to that hard court and you had a greater exchange of skills. I want to say this. A constituency with 8 hard courts and 5 playing fields, sometimes what you have is only persons from the village utilizing that playing field and not exposing themselves to the competitiveness of neighboring villages. And that is something that we are going to address in South Central Windward, because we do not want to lose on being there at the cutting edge. Mr. Speaker, throughout the entire Caribbean, the issue of roads would always be raised, and we have to do a lot with little. The Montgrenan Diamonds Road, Lowmans Road, Hadley's Village Road, Greggs Road, Lauders to Chapmans to New Grounds. We have work to do on our roads. But I'm asking the constituents to be patient. Mr. Speaker, I must say that we have come a long way in the constituency. And during this year, I'll be working very closely with the schools, the churches, and continue to work with the students, because we are working on building a better constituency. Mr. Speaker, the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we stand to benefit from a collective approach to nation building, where each citizen seeks to do more, to do better, and to allow our creative abilities as a people to give us the impetus to succeed against all odds. Let us take our instruction from the book of Hebrews 12:1. We must set aside those things which so easily beset us. Mr. Speaker, I wish this bill is safe passage to this honorable house.